Well, good morning, everyone. Mr. Minister, my friend, welcome back to Washington. It is always a pleasure to meet Minister Jaishankar, whether it's here in New York, in Delhi, Melbourne, Bali, or anywhere else. And I think our own conversations, deep extended conversations that have taken place, in fact, over many years, because we were counterparts when I was last at the State Department as Deputy Secretary. I think it reflects the fact that the partnership between our countries, between India and the United States, is simply one of the most consequential in the world. It's vital to addressing virtually every global challenge that our people face, whether it's health security, climate change, food security, upholding a free and open international order, to name just a few. Over the past years, we have made real progress in elevating that partnership, bilaterally, that is directly between us, through institutions like the QUAD and the G20, and in international organizations, including at the United Nations. Today we talked about how we can further advance our shared security, economic and geopolitical goals. Last week in New York, we were both witness to genuine unity among the vast majority of UN member states, developing and developed, big and small, north and south, on the need to work together to address these shared challenges that all of our people face, as well as to uphold the United Nations Charter and its core principles, including sovereignty, territorial integrity, and human rights. We're grateful for the Minister's partnership and leadership on these fronts. That includes in the Security Council, where, as we were together, he underscored the message that Prime Minister Modi delivered recently in Uzbekistan that, and I quote, "Today's era is not of war." And then in the General Assembly, where the Prime Minister said of India, and I quote, "We are on the side that respects the UN Charter and its founding principles," end quote. So is the United States. We recognize that to meet the challenges we face, members of the UN must not only uphold the Charter, but also modernize the institution, including by making the Security Council more inclusive. That's why in his address to the General Assembly, President Biden expressed his support for increasing the number of both permanent and non-permanent representatives of the Security Council, a long-standing goal of India. This includes permanent seats for those nations we've long supported and permanent seats for countries in Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean. In his own General Assembly address, the Minister also highlighted the food, fuel, and fertilizer crises that have hit countries as they struggle to rebuild from the COVID pandemic. And indeed, if you look at how we spent most of our week last week at the United Nations, it was focusing on these very challenges. We've been working to rally allies and partners, not only to help people around the world most affected by these crises, but also to make sure that we are part of the solution to creating durable ways of dealing with these challenges. For example, on food security, not only responding to the emergency need, but also helping countries develop durable agricultural productive capacity. We know as well that each of these crises has been exacerbated by Russia's war in Ukraine, and it's why we continue to marshal international pressure on President Putin to end his war of choice. We also held a QUAD ministerial on the margins of the UN, with the Minister and I continuing to work with our Australian and Japanese counterparts to realize what is a shared vision of a free, open Indo-Pacific that's connected, that's prosperous, that's secure, and that is resilient. And here, it's worth emphasizing that we're bringing complementary strengths to bear on problems that none of us can address effectively alone. A few examples: cybercrime. You saw in the joint statement that we issued in New York last week our agreement to deny safe haven to ransomware operations emanating from within our respective countries, because a foothold anywhere can be used to stage attacks everywhere, and to assist one another in the face of cyber attacks against critical infrastructure. One of the clearest ways that QUAD partners can continue to deliver for people across the region is by being there in times of their greatest need. In New York, we also took a step that will increase our capacity to do that we signed a set of guidelines to deepen our coordination among the four countries on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. In today's meeting, and as well at dinner last night, we also talked about ways to further strengthen our strategic partnership and advance shared objectives. This includes helping one another prevent a climate catastrophe and adapt to the changes to come, because the future of our people and people everywhere depends in no small part on hitting the ambitious targets that we both set. That includes India's goal of installing 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel capacity by 2030, which would mean more than 60% of India's electricity comes from non-polluting energy sources. We're helping to do that through the U.S.-India Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 Partnership, which is helping to foster joint research and development, mobilizing finance from the private sector and multilateral institutions, and finding ways to scale up innovative clean energy technologies. As the world's two biggest democracies, we're also committed to an enduring project, as our founders put it, of striving to form a more perfect union. This is a project for both of us. We have to work together to show that our democracies can meet our people's needs, and we must continue to hold ourselves, both of us, as well as our fellow democracies, to our core values, including respect for universal human rights, like freedom of religion and belief and freedom of expression, which makes our democracies stronger. We explored ways to keep building our dynamic economic partnership. The Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which we launched in May, is one way we'll do this. Just a few weeks ago, India affirmed its intention to participate in 3 of the framework's pillars on supply chains, clean economy, and fair economy. The U.S. is India's largest trading partner, with $157 billion last year in bilateral trade. We're India's largest source of foreign direct investment, with a diverse range of U.S. companies investing $45 billion in India: Google, Microsoft, Whirlpool, Boeing, GE, and I could go on. But we see more room to grow, and to do it in a way that creates jobs for workers in both of our countries. The U.S.-India Commercial Dialogue, the U.S.-India CEO Forum will give us more opportunities to do that in the months ahead. So these are just some of the ways, multilaterally, regionally, bilaterally, that we're bringing this close relationship between India and the United States even closer together. And with India holding the presidency of the Security Council in December and taking over the presidency of the G20 next year, we'll be able to drive more concerted global cooperation and action together. At an event this weekend, you called, Mr. Minister, the shift in U.S.-India relations the single biggest change that you've observed in decades of service as a diplomat. The minister said, and I quote, "It did not change only because of government policies. The relationship changed because of Indian Americans." And I could not agree more. We're grateful to have an Indian American community that does so much to deepen ties between our countries, as well as to shape the fabric of this country. And I'd add that we're also grateful to communities in India, including of American origin, that are doing their part to strengthen the relationship for the good of both of our countries and both of our people.